Caroline Hayes stood frozen in the doorway of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, 6 months pregnant, watching her husband, the man who controlled half the city's underground, lean across a candlelit table to kiss another woman's hand. The Mafia Boss, who could make grown men disappear with a single phone call, hadn't even noticed his wife arrive. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, she simply turned around, walked out into the December cold, and vanished from Ethan Sterling's empire. Some women break when they're betrayed. Caroline Hayes became unbreakable. If you want to see how a queen reclaims her throne without ever looking back, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The thing about marrying a man like Ethan Sterling was that you learned real quick how to read silence. Caroline had gotten good at it over 3 years of marriage, good enough to know the difference between his thinking silence, his angry silence, and his "I'm about to make someone disappear" silence. But lately, there'd been a new kind. The kind that felt like a wall going up brick by brick, and she was on the wrong side of it. She sat in the back of the town car, hands folded over the swell of her belly, watching the city lights blur past. 6 months pregnant and dressed in a deep emerald gown that cost more than most people's cars, heading to dinner with her husband. Should have felt like something special. Instead, it felt like showing up to a business meeting where she already knew she was the only one who didn't get the memo about what was really being discussed. The restaurant was the kind of place where senators ate beside hedge fund managers, and nobody asked questions. White tablecloths, crystal that caught the light just right, staff who knew how to be invisible until you needed them. Caroline gave her name at the host stand, well, gave Ethan's name because that's what mattered here, and followed the maitre d' through the dining room. That's when she saw him. Corner booth. Best view in the house. Ethan Sterling in a charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000, looking every inch the man who'd built an empire on other people's fear. Dark hair pushed back, jaw tight, those pale gray eyes that could cut through steel. And sitting across from him, laughing at something he'd just said, was a woman Caroline had never seen before. Blonde, young, wearing a black dress that probably wasn't appropriate for a business dinner. But then again, the way Ethan was looking at her made Caroline think this wasn't about business at all. She stopped walking, just stopped, right there in the middle of the restaurant, and the maitre d' kept going for 3 more steps before he realized she wasn't following anymore. "Mrs. Sterling?" he said, turning back. Caroline didn't answer. She was watching Ethan reach across the table, watching him take the woman's hand, watching him lean in close and say something that made her smile. That kind of smile women give men when they know exactly what power they hold. The maitre d' followed her gaze, and his face went carefully blank. "Perhaps I should—" "No," Caroline said. Her voice came out steady, calm, like her world wasn't currently cracking down the middle. "That won't be necessary." She turned around. "Mrs. Sterling?" But Caroline was already walking, past the tables full of powerful men making powerful deals, past the bar where expensive liquor got poured into crystal glasses, past the coat check and out the front door into the December night, where the cold hit her like a slap, and she welcomed it because at least it was real, at least it was honest. The driver was still waiting with the car. He straightened up when he saw her, confusion crossing his face. "Mrs. Sterling, is everything—" "Take me home," she said. "The penthouse, not the estate." "Should I wait for Mr. Sterling?" "No." She climbed into the back seat and pulled the door shut before he could ask anything else. Through the window, she could see the restaurant entrance. Any second now, Ethan would come out. He'd realize she'd been there. He'd have some explanation ready, delivered in that voice that could convince you black was white, if he wanted it badly enough. The car pulled away from the curb. Caroline waited for the tears to come. They didn't. What came instead was something colder, clearer. The kind of clarity that arrives when you finally stop lying to yourself about what you've been seeing all along. The penthouse was 40 floors of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. Ethan kept it for when he needed to be in the city, though lately he'd been staying there more than at their actual home in Westchester. Caroline had told herself it was business, meetings that ran late, deals that needed his attention. She told herself a lot of things. She let herself in and stood in the entryway for a long moment, looking at the place like she'd never seen it before. Modern furniture that cost a fortune but felt cold. Art on the walls that Ethan's mother had chosen because it was the right kind of art for people like them to own. floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off the city like a prize he'd won. Their bedroom was at the end of the hall. Caroline walked there slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. She pulled out the suitcase from the closet, the one she'd never actually used because Ethan always handled their travel arrangements, and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, the few personal items that actually meant something to her. She moved methodically, her mind quiet in that dangerous way that comes before a storm. She was almost done when she heard the front door open. "Caroline?" Ethan's voice, sharp with confusion. She didn't answer, just kept folding a sweater into the suitcase. His footsteps came down the hall, quick and purposeful. Then he was in the doorway, still in that expensive suit, and she could smell his cologne mixed with something else. Perfume that wasn't hers. "What the hell are you doing?" he said. Caroline looked up at him. Really looked at him. 3 years ago, she thought he was the most magnetic person she'd ever met. Dangerous and beautiful and impossible to look away from. Now she just saw a man who thought his power meant he could have everything. "Leaving," she said. "Leaving." He said it like the word didn't make sense. "Because of what? Because I had a business dinner? Is that what you're calling it?" Something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt, but close enough. "Caroline, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't insult me by pretending I didn't see what I saw. You saw me having dinner with a business associate. I saw you holding her hand. That's not—" He stopped, started again. "You're being irrational." Irrational. Caroline felt something sharp and hot rise in her chest. "I'm 6 months pregnant with your child, Ethan. I show up to the restaurant where my husband told me to meet him for dinner and I find him with another woman. But sure, I'm the one being irrational." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" He didn't answer right away. That should have told her everything she needed to know, but she waited anyway. Gave him the chance to say something true. "Her name is Isabella Corso," he said finally. "Her father controls shipping routes in the Mediterranean. We're negotiating a partnership." "And you negotiate with your hands all over hers?" "I wasn't—" He bit off the words, jaw tight. "This is business, Caroline. You know how this works. Sometimes you have to play nice with people, smile, make them feel important. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something to me." "You're overreacting." And there it was. The thing he always did when he didn't want to deal with something. Make it her problem, her emotions, her unreasonable expectations. Caroline zipped the suitcase closed. "I'm going to stay with my sister." "The hell you are." Ethan moved into the room, and there was something dangerous in the way he carried himself. Not threatening, exactly. He'd never been that with her, but dominant. Like he could make reality bend just by deciding it should. "You're my wife. You're carrying my child. You're not going anywhere. Watch me." She picked up the suitcase. It was heavier than she'd expected, but she wasn't about to show weakness now. She moved toward the door and Ethan stepped into her path. "Caroline, stop. Move. We need to talk about this." "No, we don't." She looked up at him, and maybe he saw something in her face that he'd never seen before because his expression changed. "You want to have business dinners with women who look at you like that? Fine. You want to hold their hands and lean in close and pretend it's all just part of the game? Do it. But I don't have to watch. And I sure as hell don't have to wait around for you to come home smelling like someone else's perfume and tell me I'm imagining things. You're being dramatic. And you're being a liar." The word hung in the air between them. Ethan's eyes went cold. That particular shade of gray that meant he was done playing nice. "Careful," he said quietly. "Or what?" Caroline felt something reckless unfurling inside her. "You'll make me disappear like everyone else who doesn't fall in line? Go ahead, Ethan. Show me who you really are." For a second, she thought he might actually lose it. His hands were clenched at his sides, every muscle in his body tight with barely controlled rage. But then he stepped back. "This is my mother's doing," he said. Caroline blinked. "What?" "Isabella. The dinner. All of it." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "My mother set it up, said it was important for the business, for the family image. I didn't want to go, but she insisted." "So you're saying your mother arranged for you to have an intimate dinner with another woman?" "It wasn't intimate. I saw you, Ethan. You saw what she wanted you to see. He turned back, and now there was something else in his face, something that might have been genuine frustration. My mother doesn't like that I married you. You know that. She's never liked it. Too much influence outside the family, she says. Makes me soft. I don't make you soft. I know that, but she doesn't see it that way. And she's been working on this partnership with the Corsos for months. Isabella's part of the package. The optics of it. Young, connected, from the right kind of family. Caroline felt sick. You're telling me your mother is trying to set you up with another woman while I'm pregnant with your child? I'm telling you, my mother's trying to run my life like she always has. And I'm trying to manage it. By having romantic dinners with her chosen replacement for me? It wasn't romantic, for Christ's sake. He was shouting now, and Ethan never shouted. It was a business meeting that she staged to look like something else. You think I don't know how this looks? You think I don't know what she's doing? Then why did you do it? The question came out quieter than she'd intended. But it was the only one that mattered. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Because sometimes you have to play the game until you figure out how to change the rules. I'm not a game piece, Ethan. I never said you were. You didn't have to. Caroline picked up her suitcase again. Move. This time he did. She walked past him, down the hall, through the living room that cost more than most houses. At the door, she paused. If you wanted out, she said without turning around, you should have just said so. Would have been kinder than whatever this is. Caroline. But she was already gone. Son. The cab ride to her sister's place in Brooklyn felt like crossing into another world, away from the glass towers and the power suits, away from the carefully controlled image of being Mrs. Ethan Sterling. Out here, people didn't know or care who she was. They had their own problems. Rachel answered the door in sweatpants and a college t-shirt, took one look at Caroline's face, and pulled her inside. What happened? I left him. Rachel's eyes went wide. You left. Caroline, what did he do? What didn't he do? Caroline sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs. I caught him with another woman. At dinner. He says it was his mother's idea, that she's trying to push us apart. And you believe him? I don't know what I believe anymore. Caroline closed her eyes. I just know I can't keep doing this. Can't keep pretending that everything's fine when he's pulling away more every day. Can't keep making excuses for why he's never home, why he barely talks to me, why he looks at me sometimes like I'm just another problem he has to manage. Rachel sat down beside her. You can stay here as long as you need. It won't be safe. When he realizes I'm serious about leaving, let him try. Rachel's voice went hard. You're my sister. He wants to get to you. He goes through me first. Caroline opened her eyes and looked at her sister. Rachel had always been the fighter between them. The one who didn't back down. Caroline had spent 3 years learning how to survive in Ethan's world by being careful, by choosing her battles, by making herself smaller so his empire had room to breathe. Maybe it was time to remember how to fight. Ethan didn't come after her that night, or the next day. Caroline told herself she wasn't disappointed, told herself it was better this way. He was giving her space, respecting her decision, all the things a good husband would do. But Ethan Sterling had never been a good husband. He'd been a powerful one, an attentive one when it suited him, a dangerous one when crossed. But good? That word had never applied. On the third day, the flowers started arriving, enormous arrangements that barely fit through Rachel's door. White roses. Caroline's favorite, though she couldn't remember ever telling him that. The cards were blank except for his signature. On the fourth day, it was jewelry. A diamond bracelet that probably cost more than Rachel's car. Caroline left it in the box. On the fifth day, Ethan himself showed up. Rachel answered the door with her arms crossed. She doesn't want to see you. I need to talk to my wife. Your wife needed to talk to you for the past 6 months. You were too busy having dinner with other women. Even through the closed bedroom door, Caroline could hear the ice in her sister's voice, could hear Ethan's low response, too quiet to make out the words, but vibrating with barely controlled frustration. Then Rachel again. You don't get to show up here and demand things. You lost that right. I didn't lose anything. She's still my wife. Only because she hasn't filed papers yet. You want that to change? Keep pushing. Silence. Then footsteps. The door closing. Rachel appeared in the bedroom doorway. He's gone, but he'll be back. Caroline nodded. She'd known he would come eventually, known he'd try charm first, then persistence. What she didn't know was how long it would take before he stopped trying to win her back and started trying to force her back. That answer came 2 days later. She was making tea in Rachel's tiny kitchen when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Caroline Sterling. A woman's voice, smooth, educated, cold enough to freeze water. Who is this? Vivian Sterling, your mother-in-law. I believe it's time we had a conversation. Caroline's hand tightened on the phone. In 3 years of marriage, Vivian had spoken to her exactly 7 times. Each conversation had been a masterclass in polite hostility. I don't have anything to say to you, but I have quite a bit to say to you. Vivian's voice didn't change. About your current situation, about what's best for the family, about the child you're carrying. Don't talk about my baby. Our baby. Sterling blood runs through its veins regardless of who the mother is, and that means we have interests to protect. I'm hanging up now. If you do, you'll never know the truth about what happened at that restaurant. Caroline froze. What truth? Meet me for coffee tomorrow, 1 o'clock, Cafe Reggio in the Village. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. Caroline stood there holding her phone, heart pounding. Every instinct told her not to go. Vivian Sterling was the kind of woman who could smile while she destroyed you, who'd built an empire beside her late husband and held on to it after his death by being smarter and more ruthless than anyone expected. But she'd also just offered information, and Caroline needed to know. Cafe Reggio was old-world Italian, the kind of place that had been serving espresso since before it was trendy. Caroline arrived early, took a table in the back, and waited. Vivian Sterling arrived exactly on time. Mid-60s, silver hair in a perfect chignon, wearing a cream suit that probably cost what most people made in a month. She moved through the cafe like she owned it, and maybe she did. Caroline wouldn't have been surprised. Caroline. Vivian sat down without being invited. You look tired. I'm pregnant and living out of a suitcase. How should I look? A small smile touched Vivian's lips. There she is. I wondered if you had any spine left. What do you want? To explain a few things about how my family works, things my son seems to have forgotten. Vivian ordered an espresso from the hovering waiter with a dismissive wave. Ethan has always been sentimental, even as a boy. His father tried to train it out of him, but it never quite took. He forms attachments to people who are, frankly, beneath him. I'm his wife. You're a distraction. Vivian said it like stating a fact. A very pretty distraction, I'll grant you, but a distraction nonetheless. Ethan needs to be focused on the empire, on maintaining power, on strategic alliances. Instead, he's been focused on you. So you arranged for him to meet with Isabella Corso. I arranged for him to remember what he's supposed to be doing. The Corsos are important. Their shipping routes, their connections in Europe, these things matter. A marriage alliance would solidify everything. Caroline felt her blood go cold. He's already married. Marriages can be dissolved, especially when the wife has abandoned her husband. Vivian's smile was razor sharp. Which is exactly what you've done, isn't it? Left him, taken his child, refused all contact. In the eyes of anyone who matters, you've already ended the marriage. This is insane. See, this is business. This is how empires survive. Personal feelings don't matter. Love doesn't matter. Power matters. Legacy matters. And right now, you're a liability to both. The espresso arrived. Vivian took a delicate sip before continuing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to file for divorce. Quiet, amicable, with a generous settlement that ensures you never have to worry about money again. You'll have the baby, and we'll arrange custody in a way that's appropriate for a child of sterling blood. You'll sign an NDA, of course, and in return, you get to walk away with your dignity intact and enough wealth to live very comfortably. No. I'm sorry? I said no. Caroline leaned forward. You think you can buy me off? Threaten me into giving up my child? You don't know me at all. I know you're a kindergarten teacher from New Jersey who got in over her head. Vivian's voice remained pleasant. I know you have no family money, no connections, no power of your own. I know that if you try to fight us, you'll lose everything. Then I'll lose everything. But I'm not walking away from my baby. Our baby. No. Mine. Caroline stood up. You want a war? Fine. But understand something. I've spent 3 years watching how your family operates, learning how you think. I know where the bodies are buried, Vivian, literally and figuratively. You push me, I push back, and I've got nothing to lose. She turned to leave, but Vivian's voice stopped her. That restaurant meeting? I set it up. I told Isabella exactly how to act, what to say, when to touch his hand. I made sure you'd arrive at precisely the right moment to see it all. And I told Ethan it was a business meeting he couldn't refuse. Caroline turned back slowly. Vivian was still sitting there, perfectly composed. You wanted the truth? There it is. I manipulated the situation to make you leave. Because you don't belong in this family, Caroline. You never did. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. Does Ethan know? Ethan knows what I tell him to know. He's my son. He'll choose family loyalty over romantic delusion. He always does. Caroline walked out before she could say something she'd regret. Or worse, before she could do something she'd regret. She didn't tell Rachel about the meeting. Didn't tell anyone. Just sat in the spare bedroom with her hands on her belly, feeling the baby move, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. We need to talk. She stared at it for a long time before typing back. Your mother already said everything that needed saying. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. What did she tell you? The truth. That she set up the whole thing. That she wants me gone. Caroline, I didn't know. Doesn't matter if you knew or not. What matters is that you let it happen. You chose her manipulation over checking with your wife, over telling me what was really going on. You always choose her. The phone rang. She declined the call. It rang again and again. Finally, she answered, Stop calling. Caroline, listen to me. No. You listen. She was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. For 3 years, I've been trying to fit into your world, trying to be the right kind of wife for a man like you. Quiet when you needed quiet. Supportive when you needed support. Looking the other way when you did things I didn't want to know about. But I'm done. I'm done pretending this works. It does work. We work. We don't. We haven't for a long time. You're married to your empire, Ethan, to your mother's expectations, to the version of yourself that you think you have to be. There's no room left for me. That's not true, isn't it? She could feel tears starting, but she fought them back. When's the last time you asked me how I was feeling? Really asked, not just going through the motions. When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your business or your mother or what you needed from me? Silence on the other end. I'm pregnant with your child, Caroline continued, and you didn't even notice I was pulling away. Didn't notice I was unhappy. You were too busy managing your empire to see that you were losing your wife. I see you now. Now? Now that I'm gone? That's the problem, Ethan. You only see value in things you're about to lose. Tell me what you want. Tell me what I need to do. I want you to let me go. More silence. Then quietly, I can't do that. You have to. The baby. We'll be fine. We'll figure out custody. But us? There is no us anymore. Maybe there never really was. She hung up before he could respond, turned off her phone before he could call back. Rachel found her an hour later, sitting in the dark, crying silently. Hey, her sister said softly, sitting down beside her. Talk to me. I don't know how to do this, Caroline whispered. I don't know how to walk away from him and survive what comes next. His mother made it pretty clear they're going to fight for custody. And Ethan, he's not going to let me go easily. So what do you do? I don't know. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember when Mom died and Dad fell apart? Yeah. You were 16. I was 19. We had no money, no plan, nothing. But you figured it out. You got scholarships. You worked 3 jobs to help pay bills. You kept us afloat when everything was falling apart. That was different. Was it? Rachel looked at her. You've always been stronger than you think you are, Caroline. You just forgot for a while because you were too busy trying to be strong in someone else's way. But that woman who walked out of that restaurant, who stood up to Vivian Sterling, that's who you really are. Don't forget her again. Caroline wiped her eyes. I'm scared. Good. Be scared. Be terrified. Then do it anyway. Somewhere in the city, Ethan Sterling was probably tearing his empire apart looking for ways to bring her back. His mother was probably already 10 steps ahead, planning legal strategies and power moves. But sitting there in her sister's apartment, feeling her baby move, Caroline made a decision. She wasn't going back. Not to the penthouse. Not to the carefully controlled life. Not to being the woman who made herself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. She was done surviving. It was time to figure out how to actually live. And if that meant war with the Sterling family, then war it would be. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and expensive coffee. Caroline sat across from a woman named Patricia Chen, who had the kind of sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every dirty trick in the book and invented a few of her own. So, Patricia said, flipping through the folder Caroline had brought, bank statements, property deeds, business documents she'd quietly copied over the past 2 years. You've been preparing for this. I wasn't sure what I was preparing for, Caroline admitted. I just knew that if things ever went sideways, I'd need proof of everything. Patricia looked up, something like approval in her expression. Smart. Most women in your position don't think that far ahead. They trust their husbands right up until the divorce papers get filed and suddenly everything's in offshore accounts they can't touch. Ethan's not stupid. He'll have protected his assets. Probably. But you'd be surprised what people forget to hide when they think their wife is just a kindergarten teacher who doesn't understand how money works. Patricia pulled out a legal pad. Tell me what you want out of this. My daughter. Full custody if possible, joint if necessary, but I want primary custody. Financial support? Whatever's fair for the baby. I don't want his money for myself. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? You're entitled to a significant settlement. Community property, spousal support. I don't want to owe him anything. Not money, not favors, nothing that gives him leverage. Caroline put a hand on her belly. I just want to raise my daughter away from all this. Away from his world. His mother's already hired representation, by the way. Marcus Webb. He's the kind of lawyer who makes other lawyers look like amateurs. How do you know that? Because he called me yesterday to suggest I drop you as a client before things get ugly. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I told him to go to hell. Politely, of course. Caroline felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time in days, she wasn't completely alone in this. There's something else you should know, Patricia continued. Webb mentioned they have evidence of abandonment. You leaving the marital home, refusing contact, taking the baby. They're building a case that you're unstable, that you made a rash decision based on irrational jealousy. I caught him with another woman. Did you? Or did you catch him at a business dinner that his mother arranged, which he can prove with emails and meeting minutes and testimony from a dozen witnesses who'll say it was completely professional? Patricia's voice was gentle, but firm. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying the Sterling family is very good at making reality look however they want it to look. Caroline's phone buzzed. Another text from Ethan. She'd turned it back on that morning because her doctor's office needed to reach her about an appointment. Big mistake, please, just talk to me. She silenced it. He keeps texting, she said. Don't respond. Don't call. Don't engage at all, unless it's through me. Every conversation you have with him right now is potential ammunition. Patricia made a note on her pad. You said you're staying with your sister? For now, find somewhere else. Soon as possible. Somewhere he doesn't know about. The Sterling family has resources, Caroline. They can find you at your sister's place without breaking a sweat. You need to disappear for a while. Where am I supposed to go? I have a colleague who runs a women's shelter. Discreet, secure, works with women leaving dangerous situations. It's not luxury, but I don't need luxury. I need safety. Patricia studied her for a long moment. You're tougher than you look. I'm learning to be. The meeting lasted another hour. They went through everything, Caroline's options, the likely trajectory of a custody fight, what evidence they'd need to counter whatever the Sterlings threw at them. By the time Caroline left, her head was spinning and her back was aching from sitting too long. She was almost to the subway when a black Mercedes pulled up alongside her. The window rolled down. Ethan. Get in the car, he said. No. Caroline, it's 30 degrees out and you're pregnant. Get in the damn car. I'm fine. He put the car in park right there in the middle of traffic and got out. Other drivers started honking immediately, but Ethan ignored them. He always ignored things that didn't serve his purposes. "You're not fine," he said, coming around to stand in front of her. "You look exhausted. You're living out of a suitcase. This is ridiculous." "What's ridiculous is you stalking me." "I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to talk to my wife." "Your mother's lawyer already delivered her message. I got it loud and clear." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Webb. The evidence of abandonment. The whole strategy to paint me as unstable so you can take custody." Caroline pulled her coat tighter against the wind. "Tell Vivian she's wasting her time. I'm not backing down."
"I don't know what Webb told you, but I didn't hire him. My mother did." "Same difference." "It's not." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I told her not to hire him, told her we could work this out ourselves like adults, but she doesn't listen." "Must be hard," Caroline said, "having a mother who tries to control your life."
He looked at her sharply. "You think I don't know what she did? I confronted her the day after you left. She admitted everything. The dinner, the setup, all of it. And what did you do about it?" "I told her to stay out of my marriage." "Did she?" The honking was getting louder. Someone yelled something about moving the car. Ethan barely glanced back. "Get in," he said again. "We can't talk like this." "We can't talk at all. My lawyer said—" "Screw the lawyers, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Maybe it was the cold finally getting to her. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the look on his face that reminded her of the man she'd fallen in love with before everything got so complicated. But Caroline got in the car. Ethan slid back behind the wheel and pulled into traffic. The angry horns faded behind them. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Nowhere. Just driving." They didn't speak for several blocks. Caroline watched the city slide past, all those people with their own problems, their own marriages, their own struggles. None of them knew who she was. None of them cared. "I moved out of the penthouse," Ethan said finally. "What?" "I'm staying at a hotel. The penthouse was— I couldn't be there. Every room reminded me that you were gone." Caroline didn't know what to say to that. Part of her, the part that still remembered being in love, wanted to believe he meant it. The rest of her knew better than to trust easy words. "My mother called an emergency family meeting yesterday," he continued. "My uncle, my cousins, her entire inner circle. She laid out her plan for handling this situation. That's what she called it. A situation." "What was the plan?" "Isolate you, drain your resources, make the custody fight so expensive and brutal that you'd have no choice but to settle on her terms." His hands tightened on the wheel. "She had charts, Caroline, spreadsheets, like you were a business problem she needed to solve." "So what did you do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I told her if she didn't back off, I'd walk away from everything. The business, the family, all of it." Caroline turned to look at him. "You're lying." "I'm not. You'd never walk away from your empire." "I'd walk away for my daughter." He glanced at her. "For you." "Don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I mean it." "You said that before, when we got married. You meant it then too, and look where we are now." The car slowed to a stop at a red light. Ethan turned to face her fully. "I know I failed you," he said. "I know I let my mother manipulate me, let the business consume me, let everything else matter more than you did. I know all of that, but I'm trying to fix it." "You can't fix it, Ethan. It's broken." "Then let me try anyway." The light turned green. He didn't move. "People are waiting," Caroline said. "Let them wait." "You always do this. Always think the rules don't apply to you." "The rules don't apply to me." That's the point of having power. And there it was, the fundamental difference between them. Ethan lived in a world where power meant you could bend reality to your will. Caroline lived in a world where reality didn't care how much power you had. A car behind them honked. Ethan finally put the car in drive. "Where do you want me to take you?" he asked. "Rachel's apartment." "You're still staying there?" "Where else would I go?" He didn't answer, but something in his expression made her nervous, like he knew something she didn't. They pulled up outside Rachel's building 20 minutes later. Caroline reached for the door handle, but Ethan caught her wrist. "Don't leave again," he said. "Not like this." "I have to." "Why?" "Because staying means surrendering. Means accepting that your mother controls everything and I just have to live with it. I can't do that. What if I dealt with my mother?
You can't deal with her. She's your mother. She's in your blood. I can make her back off. How? By threatening to walk away? She knows you won't actually do it. Caroline pulled her wrist free. You love your empire too much. You love the power, the control, the fear in people's eyes when they hear your name. That's who you are, Ethan, and I can't compete with that. She got out of the car before he could respond. Didn't look back as she walked into the building.
Rachel was waiting in the apartment, her face tight with worry. I saw his car outside, she said. Did he hurt you?
No, we just talked. About what? Caroline sank onto the couch. He says he confronted his mother, says he's willing to walk away from everything. Do you believe him? I don't know what I believe anymore. Her phone buzzed again. Not Ethan this time, a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer.
Is this Caroline Sterling? A man's voice, smooth and professional. Who's asking? Marcus Webb. I represent the Sterling family interests. I wanted to reach out personally before things escalate further. Caroline's stomach dropped. I have a lawyer. I'm aware. Patricia Chen, good lawyer, but she's outmatched here, and we both know it. There was no hostility in his voice, just facts delivered calmly. I'd like to propose a meeting. You, me, and my clients. No lawyers, no posturing, just a conversation about what's best for everyone involved. Your client threatened to destroy me. My client is concerned about her grandchild, as any grandmother would be. Her son's the one who screwed up this marriage. Marriages are complicated. Blame rarely falls entirely on one party. A pause. Mrs. Sterling, may I call you Caroline? I've been practicing family law for 23 years. I've seen a lot of custody fights, and I can tell you right now this one won't end well for anyone if we don't find a middle ground. What kind of middle ground? Meet with us. Hear what we have to say. If you don't like it, you walk away and we proceed through legal channels. But at least give dialogue a chance. Caroline closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that Vivian Sterling didn't do dialogue, she did domination. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. I'll have my assistant send over some potential times. Webb's voice softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're handling a difficult situation with grace. Your daughter is lucky to have a mother who fights for her. He hung up before she could respond. Rachel had been listening to the whole conversation. You're not seriously considering meeting with them. I don't know. Caroline, they'll tear you apart. Maybe. Or maybe this is my chance to see what they're really planning. Know your enemy and all that. This isn't a game. I know it's not, but I'm tired of running blind. Caroline looked at her sister. I need to see Vivian face to face. Need to understand what she's really after. What she's after is your baby. Then I need to know how far she's willing to go to get her. The meeting was set for 3 days later at a law office in Midtown. Neutral ground, Webb had called it, though Caroline doubted anything involving the Sterling family could truly be neutral. Patricia came with her despite Caroline's protests. You go into that room alone, your prey, her lawyer had said. We go in together, we're equals. The conference room was all glass and steel, overlooking the city from 40 floors up. Vivian was already there when they arrived, perfectly composed in a navy suit. Marcus Webb sat beside her, legal pads stacked in front of him. Ethan wasn't there. Where's your son? Caroline asked as she sat down. Vivian smiled thinly. Ethan's presence isn't required for this discussion. This is about family business. I'm his wife. That makes me family. For now. The words hung in the air like a threat. Webb cleared his throat. Thank you both for coming. I think we can all agree that the current situation isn't sustainable. A prolonged custody battle helps no one, least of all the child. Then drop your threats and let me raise my daughter in peace, Caroline said. We're not threatening you, Webb replied smoothly. We're offering you options. Options like what? Vivian leaned forward. You give birth here in the city where we can ensure proper medical care. You stay in a residence we provide, comfortable, secure, fully staffed. After the baby arrives, we establish a custody arrangement that gives you significant time with your daughter while also ensuring she grows up with the resources and protection of the Sterling name. You want me to be a kept woman in a gilded cage. I want my grandchild to be safe. Safe from what? From me, from poverty, from irrelevance, from a life of struggle that she doesn't have to endure. Vivian's voice was calm, rational. You love your daughter, I don't doubt that. But love isn't enough. She needs security, education, opportunities, things the Sterling family can provide. I can provide those things. On a kindergarten teacher's salary? Vivian tilted her head. Please don't insult my intelligence. We both know you can't give her the life she deserves without our help. Patricia spoke up. Mrs. Sterling is entitled to child support regardless of custody arrangements. The child will have financial security. Money from Ethan, yes, but not the family resources, not the connections, the protection, the network that comes with the Sterling name. Vivian turned back to Caroline. You walked away from my son. That's your choice. But you can't walk away from reality. Watch me. I have. Vivian pulled out a folder from her bag. I've been watching you quite carefully, actually. Your sister Rachel, for instance. She has significant credit card debt. A car loan she's 3 months behind on. If she loses her job, she'll lose her apartment within 60 days. Caroline felt ice spread through her veins. Don't you dare! I'm not threatening her, I'm stating facts. Facts that become relevant when you're staying in her home, depending on her support. What happens when she can't support herself, much less you and a baby? Patricia put a hand on Caroline's arm. A warning. Vivian continued as if there'd been no interruption. Or perhaps we should discuss your father. Still living in that nursing facility in Newark, correct? The one that costs $4,300 a month. I understand your sister handles those payments now since your teacher salary doesn't quite stretch that far. Stop talking.
Why? These are just facts, Caroline. Uncomfortable facts, perhaps, but facts nonetheless. You want to fight me? Fine. But understand what that fight looks like. Understand who gets hurt along the way. Caroline stood up. We're done here. Sit down. No. Sit. Down. Something sharp flashed in Vivian's eyes. I haven't finished. I don't care.
You should. Because I haven't even gotten to the interesting part yet. Vivian opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Do you recognize this woman? Caroline looked. It was the blonde from the restaurant, Isabella Corso. She's 24 years old, Vivian said. Columbia graduate, speaks 4 languages. Her family controls shipping throughout the Mediterranean, and she's been in love with my son since they met at a charity gala 2 years ago. I don't care who she's in love with. You should, because she's pregnant. The room went silent. Caroline felt the floor shift beneath her. What? 3 months along. She came to me 6 weeks ago, terrified, not knowing what to do. Her family would disown her if they found out she'd been sleeping with a married man. Vivian's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. I told her I'd handle it, that I'd make sure she and the baby were taken care of. You're lying. I have medical records if you'd like to see them. Patricia grabbed Caroline's arm. Don't look at anything without letting me review it first. But Caroline couldn't look away from Vivian's face, couldn't process what she was hearing. Ethan doesn't know, Vivian continued. I thought it best to keep it between Isabella and myself for now. But if this custody fight goes forward, if you insist on dragging my family through the courts, well, these things have a way of coming out. And I wonder how a judge would view a woman who abandoned her husband while he has another child on the way. Makes you look rather vindictive, doesn't it? This is blackmail, Patricia said. This is reality, Webb corrected. And the reality is that Mrs. Sterling has options. She can work with us and ensure everyone's needs are met, or she can fight us and watch everything fall apart. Caroline's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the table to make them stop. You planned all of this, she said quietly. The restaurant, the setup. All of it was just to get me out of the way so Isabella could take my place. I planned for my son's future, for my family's legacy. You were an obstacle to that. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. Caroline laughed, but it came out wrong. Broken. You destroyed my marriage and you call it nothing personal. I gave you 3 years in my son's life. 3 years more than you deserved. You should be grateful. Caroline stood up again. This time Patricia didn't stop her. I'm not making a deal with you, Caroline said. Not now, not ever. You want a war? You've got one, but don't expect me to play by your rules. She walked out before Vivian could respond. Made it all the way to the elevator before her legs gave out. Patricia caught her. Breathe, just breathe. She planned everything, the whole thing. I know. Ethan has another child coming. We don't know that. Could be a complete fabrication. It's not. I could see it in her face. She wasn't bluffing. The elevator arrived. They got in. Caroline leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. What do I do? She whispered. You make a choice. Fight or settle. If I settle, I lose my daughter. If you fight, you might lose everything else. The elevator descended in silence. When they reached the lobby, Caroline's phone was buzzing. Multiple messages from Ethan. Where are you? My mother just called. What happened? Caroline, please, talk to me. She silenced the phone and looked at Patricia. I need to leave the city, she said. Today. Now. Before they do anything else. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere they can't find me. Caroline put a hand on her belly. Somewhere I can think without Vivian Sterling pulling strings. If you run, they'll call it kidnapping, use it against you in court. I don't care, I can't stay here. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. My aunt has a house on the coast of Maine. Small town, nobody asks questions. She owes me a favor. Patricia handed over the card. It's not much, but it's yours if you need it. Just for a little while, until we figure out our next move. Caroline took the card. The address was for a place called Lighthouse Point. She'd never heard of it. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. Running only works if you're smart about it. Cash only, no credit cards, no phone calls from numbers they can trace. You understand? I understand. And Caroline, Patricia's voice was serious. Whatever you decide to do next, make sure it's something you can live with, because there's no going back from this. Caroline nodded. She'd figured that out already. By the time she got back to Rachel's apartment, she'd made her decision. She was leaving. Tonight. Before Ethan could find her, before Vivian could make another move, before anyone else could tell her what she should do with her own life. Rachel helped her pack without asking questions. Just threw clothes into a bag while Caroline gathered what little money she had. You sure about this? Rachel asked finally. No, but I'm doing it anyway. What should I tell Ethan when he comes looking? Tell him the truth. That I left, and you don't know where I went. He won't believe me. Probably not, but that's not your problem. Caroline hugged her sister tight. Thank you. For everything. Call me when you get there. Let me know you're safe. I will. Caroline left the apartment at midnight, took a cab to Penn Station, bought a ticket north with cash, and boarded a train just as it was pulling away from the platform. She watched the city lights fade into darkness through the window and tried not to think about what she was leaving behind. Tried not to think about Ethan, about the empire she'd walked away from, about the daughter growing inside her who would never know the kind of wealth and power that came with the Sterling name. All she could think about was Vivian's face across that conference table, the cold calculation in her eyes, the absolute certainty that she would win because she always won. Caroline put a hand on her belly and made a silent promise. She would not let them take her daughter. She would not let them turn her child into another piece on Vivian Sterling's chessboard, even if it meant burning every bridge she'd ever built, even if it meant becoming someone she'd never planned to be. The train pushed north through the darkness, carrying her toward a future she couldn't see but refused to surrender. And somewhere behind her, in a city that never stopped moving, Ethan Sterling was probably just realizing she was gone. Lighthouse Point turned out to be exactly what its name suggested, a collection of weathered houses clustered around a rocky shore, with an actual lighthouse standing sentinel over the Atlantic. Population maybe 300 if you counted generously. The kind of place where strangers got noticed, but nobody cared enough to ask questions if you kept to yourself. Patricia's aunt's house sat at the edge of town, a small cottage with peeling blue paint and windows that rattled when the wind picked up. The key was under the third flower pot on the porch, just like Patricia had said. Caroline let herself in and stood in the tiny living room, taking in the faded furniture and the smell of salt air that seemed to permeate everything. It wasn't the penthouse, it wasn't even close to the kind of life she'd gotten used to, but it was hers, at least for now, and that was enough. She'd been there for 2 days when the nausea started getting worse, morning sickness that lasted all day, making it hard to keep anything down. By the third day, she was weak enough that she had to drag herself to the local clinic, a tiny building that looked more like someone's converted garage than a medical facility. The doctor was a woman in her 50s named Sarah Mitchell, who took one look at Caroline and pointed to the examination table without preamble. "When's your due date?" Dr. Mitchell asked, pulling out a blood pressure cuff. 3 months. Give or take. Give or take isn't good enough. You need proper prenatal care. I know. Dr. Mitchell wrapped the cuff around Caroline's arm and pumped it tight. You running from something? Caroline's head snapped up. What makes you say that? Because you just showed up in my town 6 months pregnant, no medical records, paying in cash, and looking over your shoulder like someone's about to walk through that door. The doctor released the cuff and made a note on her chart. I've been doing this long enough to recognize the signs. I'm not in danger. Didn't say you were. Just said you're running. Dr. Mitchell pulled up a stool. Here's the thing about small towns. People here, they mind their business. You don't bother them, they don't bother you. But they also look out for each other. You need help, you ask. You need privacy. You get it. Understand? Caroline nodded slowly. Good. Now let's check on this baby. The examination was thorough and efficient. Dr. Mitchell didn't ask about the father, didn't press for details about Caroline's situation, just focused on making sure both she and the baby were healthy. By the time it was done, Caroline felt steadier than she had in weeks. You're dehydrated and your blood pressure's higher than I'd like, Dr. Mitchell said, scribbling a prescription. I want to see you weekly until delivery. No arguments. I can't afford weekly appointments. Did I ask if you could afford it? I said weekly. The doctor handed over the prescription. There's a pharmacy 2 blocks down. Tell Jim I sent you. He'll fill it without asking stupid questions. Caroline took the paper, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just take care of yourself and that baby. Walking back to the cottage, Caroline felt the first drops of rain starting to fall. By the time she reached the porch, it was coming down hard, turning the dirt road to mud and obscuring the ocean in sheets of gray. She let herself inside and stood at the window, watching the storm roll in. Her phone buzzed. She'd been ignoring it for days, letting the messages pile up unread. But something made her check this time. 53 missed calls from Ethan, 37 text messages, 12 voicemails, and 1 message from a number she didn't recognize. She opened that one first. I know you think running solves something. It doesn't, but I respect the instinct. We'll talk when you're ready to be rational. V. Vivian. Somehow she'd gotten this number even though Caroline had bought a new phone with a new SIM card at a rest stop in Connecticut. Caroline deleted the message and turned off the phone entirely, pulled out the SIM card and dropped it in a glass of water just to be safe. Probably paranoid, but paranoid was better than found. The rain continued through the night and into the next day. Caroline spent the time unpacking what little she'd brought, trying to make the cottage feel less temporary. It was harder than she expected. Everything she touched reminded her of what she'd left behind. The expensive clothes that felt ridiculous here. The jewelry Ethan had given her that she should probably sell but couldn't bring herself to part with. The ultrasound photo from her last appointment, showing a tiny profile that looked impossibly perfect. She was folding a sweater when someone knocked on the door. Caroline froze. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody except Patricia and Rachel, and they wouldn't have given up her location. The knock came again, harder this time. She moved to the window and peered out carefully. A man stood on the porch, collar turned up against the rain. Not Ethan. Not anyone she recognized. Maybe 60, with gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from working outdoors. He knocked a third time. Caroline debated not answering. But this was a small town, and if she was going to hide here, she couldn't be the weird pregnant lady who refused to open her door. That would get people talking faster than anything. She opened it a crack, keeping the chain on. Help you? She said. Name's Tom Bradley. I live next door. He gestured to a house barely visible through the rain. Wanted to introduce myself and bring you this. He held up a casserole dish covered in foil. Caroline stared at it. You brought me food? My wife did. She passed 2 years back, but I still make her recipes sometimes. Made too much tonight. He shrugged. Figured you might be hungry. She didn't know what to say to that. In Ethan's world, nobody did anything without wanting something in return. But Tom just stood there in the rain, holding out a casserole like it was the most natural thing in the world.
That's very kind, Caroline managed, but you didn't have to.
I know I didn't have to. That's why it's called kindness. He smiled slightly. You gonna let me in or make me stand out here getting pneumonia? She unlatched the chain and opened the door. Tom stepped inside, water dripping from his jacket, and set the casserole on the small kitchen table. You just moved in, right? He said. Few days ago.
Thought so. Saw the lights on.
He looked around the cottage. Patricia's aunt used to live here. Good woman. Kept to herself mostly, but she'd help anyone who needed it. Guess that runs in the family. So he knew Patricia. Or at least knew of her. I'm just staying temporarily, Caroline said, until I figure some things out. Aren't we all? Tom headed back toward the door, then paused. Storm's supposed to get worse tonight. You need anything. You see my porch light. It's always on. Otherwise, I'll leave you be. He left before she could thank him properly. Caroline stood there for a moment, then went to the table and lifted the foil on the casserole. It was still warm, and it smelled better than anything she'd eaten in days. She got a fork and ate it standing at the counter, and for the first time since leaving New York, she felt something other than fear. The storm did get worse. Wind howled around the cottage, making the old frame creak and groan. Rain lashed the windows hard enough that Caroline worried they might break. She tried to sleep but kept jerking awake, heart pounding, convinced she heard footsteps on the porch or saw headlights through the curtains. Around 3 a.m, she gave up and made tea. Sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around the mug, listening to the house settle around her. Her daughter kicked. Sharp little jabs against her ribs, like she was protesting the lack of sleep. I know, Caroline said quietly, putting a hand on her belly. I'm sorry. This isn't what I planned either. She'd spent so much time thinking about escaping Ethan, escaping Vivian, escaping the whole Sterling Empire, that she hadn't really thought about what came after, what kind of life she could actually give this baby. Single mother in a strange town with no job, no support system, running from a family that had unlimited resources to find her. The smart thing would be to go back, accept whatever deal Vivian offered, let the baby grow up with money and protection and every advantage the Sterling name could provide. But the thought of walking back into that world, of surrendering, made Caroline feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. The storm finally broke around dawn. Caroline fell asleep at the table and woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and someone knocking on the door again. This time it was a woman, maybe 30, with red hair pulled back in a messy bun and paint stains on her jeans. Hi, she said when Caroline opened the door. I'm Meg. I live 3 houses down. Saw you moved in and thought I'd say welcome to the neighborhood. Caroline rubbed sleep from her eyes. Thanks. Also, I wanted to make sure you were okay after last night. That was a hell of a storm. I'm fine. House held up. Good. These old places are tougher than they look. Meg shifted her weight. Listen, I know you probably want to be left alone, and that's totally fair. But if you need anything, groceries, ride somewhere, someone to talk to, I'm around. I work from home mostly, so... What do you do? Caroline asked, curious despite herself. I'm a painter, not like houses, like art. Doesn't pay great, but it keeps me fed. Meg grinned. Plus, I get to set my own hours, which is pretty much the only perk. That sounds nice. It's not bad. Lonely sometimes, but that's probably why I'm over here bothering you instead of working. She glanced at Caroline's belly. When are you due? 3 months. Exciting. Terrifying. Probably both at once. Definitely both. Meg hesitated, then said, Look, I'm not trying to pry or anything, but Tom mentioned you're here by yourself, and I just wanted to say, this town's pretty good about looking out for people, especially pregnant women. So if you need help, don't be too proud to ask. It was the second time someone had offered help without expecting anything in return. Caroline didn't know how to process it. I appreciate that, she said. Cool. Well, I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing. Just wanted to introduce myself. Meg started to leave, then turned back. Oh, and there's a diner in town that does the best blueberry pancakes you'll ever eat. Lou's place. You should check it out. After Meg left, Caroline showered and changed into clean clothes. The rain had washed everything clean, leaving the world looking sharp and new. She walked into town, following Meg's directions to Lou's place. The diner was exactly what she expected. Vinyl booths, checkered floor, a long counter with stools that had seen better days.
Only a few customers at this hour, mostly older men drinking coffee and reading newspapers. Caroline slid into a booth, and a waitress appeared immediately. Name tag said Linda. She had gray hair and the kind of efficient friendliness that came from decades of service work. "What can I get you, honey?" "Blueberry pancakes and orange juice." "Good choice. Those pancakes are the real deal." Linda poured water into a glass and set it down. "You new in town?" "Just visiting." "Uh-huh." Linda's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second but wasn't going to push. "Well, welcome anyway. Food'll be out in a few." The pancakes were as good as advertised. Caroline ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching through the window as the town went about its morning. People walking dogs, kids on bikes, an old couple holding hands as they crossed the street. Normal. Quiet. Nothing like the life she'd known. She was almost done eating when the door opened and a man walked in. Tall, dark suit, expensive shoes that looked ridiculous against the diner's worn linoleum. Caroline's fork clattered against her plate. It wasn't Ethan, but it was close enough. Same build, same way of moving like he owned whatever space he occupied. He scanned the diner, eyes landing on her for a fraction of a second before moving on. Her heart was hammering. She forced herself to breathe normally, to finish her pancakes like nothing was wrong. The man sat at the counter and ordered coffee. Didn't look at her again? Just a businessman passing through? Nothing to worry about. But Caroline couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been found. She paid her bill in cash and left quickly, walking back to the cottage without looking behind her. Once inside, she locked the door and checked every window, making sure the curtains were drawn tight. Paranoid. She was being paranoid. Except Vivian had found her number somehow. And the Sterling family had resources that could track anyone, anywhere, if they wanted to, badly enough. Caroline sat on the couch and tried to think. She could run again. Pack up tonight and disappear to somewhere even more remote. But running forever wasn't sustainable, especially with a baby on the way. Or she could stay and hope they didn't find her. Hope that Patricia had been careful enough, that this town was small enough to fly under their radar. Or she could do something she'd been avoiding since leaving New York. She could call Ethan. The thought made her feel sick. But maybe it was time to hear what he had to say. Time to find out if he knew about Isabella's pregnancy, if he was part of his mother's plans, or another pawn in her games. She pulled out her old phone, the one she'd destroyed the SIM card for, and plugged it in. It took a few minutes to power up. When it did, the voicemail notifications went crazy. She listened to the first one. "Caroline, it's me. I know you're angry and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, just call me back. We need to talk." Ethan's voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Second message. "My mother told me what she said to you about Isabella. Caroline, it's not what you think. None of this is what you think. Please let me explain." Third message. "I'm going insane not knowing where you are. If you're safe. Rachel won't tell me anything and I don't blame her, but I need to know you're okay, that the baby's okay. Please." The messages went on like that. Ethan getting progressively more desperate, more raw. By the 20th message, he sounded like a man coming apart. "I confronted Isabella," he said in message 43. "Made her tell me the truth. Caroline, she's not pregnant. She was never pregnant. My mother paid her to lie, to say whatever it took to get you to back down. It was all fabricated. Everything." Caroline stopped the message, rewound it, listened again. Not pregnant. Vivian had lied. Or Ethan was lying now, saying whatever he thought she needed to hear to come back. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Didn't know who to trust. The last message was from 2 days ago. "I hired a private investigator to find you. Don't be angry. I had to know you were safe." A pause. "He tracked you to Maine, some town on the coast, but I told him to stop looking. Told him I didn't want to know exactly where you were. Because if I knew, I'd come get you, and I don't think that's what you need right now." His voice cracked slightly. "I love you. I know I have a terrible way of showing it. I know I've let my mother manipulate me, let the business consume me, let everything else matter more than you. But I love you, and I love our daughter, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that if you give me the chance." Silence. Then he hung up. Caroline sat holding the phone for a long time. Then she did something she probably shouldn't have. She called him back. He answered on the first ring. "Caroline?" Just her name, but the relief in his voice was palpable. "I got your messages," she said. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?"
We're fine. Where are you? Somewhere safe. I meant what I said. About not coming after you, about giving you space. He sounded exhausted. But I need you to know the truth. Isabella isn't pregnant. She never was. My mother paid her to claim she was, gave her fake medical records, all of it. I have proof. I confronted both of them and Isabella finally admitted it. How do I know you're not lying? You don't. But I'm not. I swear on our daughter's life I'm not lying. A pause. Isabella's gone. I paid her triple what my mother offered to disappear and never come back. And I told my mother that if she ever interferes in my marriage again, I'm done. With her, with the family, with everything. You said that before. This time I meant it. Caroline closed her eyes. I can't do this, Ethan. I can't keep playing these games with your mother. Can't keep wondering if you're going to choose her over me every time things get hard. I'm not choosing her. I'm choosing you. Words are easy. Then let me prove it with actions. Tell me what you need. Anything. I'll do it. I need you to leave me alone. Silence on the other end. Then quietly. Okay. What? Okay. If that's what you need, I'll leave you alone. I'll send support for the baby through Patricia. I won't call, won't text, won't try to find you. I'll give you space until you're ready to talk to me. Caroline hadn't expected that. She'd expected him to fight, to argue, to try to convince her she was wrong. Why? She asked. Because I finally figured out that loving someone means respecting what they need, not just what I want. And you need space, so I'm giving it to you. Just like that. Just like that. He took a breath. But Caroline, when our daughter is born, I want to be there, not in the delivery room if you don't want me there, not making demands or trying to control anything. Just there, somewhere in the hospital, waiting. So I can meet her, so she knows from day one that her father showed up. Caroline felt tears starting. Damn pregnancy hormones. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. They sat in silence for a moment, connected by phone but separated by hundreds of miles in a gulf of hurt that felt impossible to cross. I have to go, Caroline said finally. Okay, take care of yourself. Ethan? Yeah? If you're lying to me about Isabella, if this is just another manipulation, I will make sure you never see your daughter. You understand? I understand, and I'm not lying. She hung up before he could say anything else. For a long time, Caroline just sat there, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Ethan backing off, giving her space, not pushing. That wasn't the man she'd married. That man would have come up here, found her, dragged her back by force if necessary. Either he'd changed, or this was the longest con Vivian Sterling had ever played. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo. Caroline went to her appointments with Dr. Mitchell, who continued to be gruff and efficient and weirdly comforting. She got to know her neighbors slowly, Tom with his casseroles, Meg with her paint-stained enthusiasm, Linda at the diner who always remembered to add extra blueberries to her pancakes. The baby grew. Caroline's belly got bigger, her back ached more, and suddenly she was 7 months pregnant in a tiny coastal town with winter closing in. Rachel called every few days to check on her. Patricia sent updates about the legal situation, which had gone quiet after Ethan instructed his mother's lawyer to stand down. No more threats. No more aggressive moves. Just silence. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made Caroline nervous. She knew Vivian Sterling well enough by now to know that silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. She was right to be nervous. The revelation came on a Tuesday morning when Patricia called, voice tight with barely controlled rage. You need to sit down, Patricia said. I'm already sitting. Then brace yourself, because I just found out something that changes everything. Caroline's hand went to her belly automatically. What? Your father-in-law, Ethan's father. He didn't die of a heart attack like everyone thinks. What are you talking about? I have a contact in the medical examiner's office. Got curious about the Sterling family history and pulled some files. Richard Sterling's death was ruled a heart attack, but there were irregularities. The toxicology report showed elevated levels of digoxin, a heart medication he wasn't prescribed, and the attending physician noted suspicious circumstances but was overruled by the chief medical examiner. Caroline felt cold. Are you saying... I'm saying Vivian Sterling may have killed her husband. And if she did that, if she's capable of that, then what else is she capable of? The room tilted slightly. Caroline gripped the arm of the couch. You can't prove this, she said. Not yet, but I'm working on it. And Caroline, if this is true, if we can prove it, it changes everything about your custody case. Because no judge in the country is going to give Vivian Sterling access to your child if there's even a possibility she's a murderer. After Patricia hung up, Caroline sat in the silent cottage and tried to process what she'd just learned. Vivian murdering her own husband. It should have seemed impossible, but the more Caroline thought about it, the more it made a terrible kind of sense. Richard Sterling had been preparing to step back from the business, according to things Ethan had mentioned. Wanted to retire, travel, maybe even dissolve some of the criminal elements of the empire. And then suddenly he was dead, and Vivian was in full control. Convenient. Caroline stood up and went to the window. Outside, snow was starting to fall. The first real snow of the season, turning the gray ocean town white. Her daughter kicked again, stronger now, insistent. "I know," Caroline said softly. "I know. Everything's complicated. But maybe it was about to get simpler, because if Patricia could prove what Vivian had done, then the whole Sterling empire would crumble, and Ethan would have to choose his mother's legacy or his daughter's future. Caroline had a feeling she knew which one he'd pick. The question was whether it would be enough. The snow kept falling through the night, piling up against the cottage windows, until the world outside looked like something from a postcard. Caroline couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Patricia's phone call, about Vivian Sterling and what she might have done, about how far someone would go to protect power they thought belonged to them. By morning, she'd made a decision. She called Patricia back. "I need you to find everything you can," Caroline said. "Medical records, witness statements, anyone who was there when Richard died. Everything." "Already on it. But Caroline, this is dangerous. If Vivian finds out we're digging into this, she's already trying to take my daughter. What else can she do to me?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. "A lot, actually. But I get your point. Just be careful. And maybe consider telling Ethan what we found." "Why would I do that?" "Because if his mother really did kill his father, he deserves to know. And because right now he's your best ally against her, like it or not." Caroline hung up without agreeing to anything. The thought of calling Ethan, of dragging him into this mess, felt wrong. But Patricia had a point. If they were going to take down Vivian Sterling, they'd need leverage. And Ethan's testimony, his inside knowledge of the family, could be exactly that. She spent the day trying to distract herself. Went for a walk into town despite the snow, stopping at the general store for groceries. The owner, an elderly man named Frank, helped her load everything into bags without being asked. "You need a ride back?" he said. "Roads are getting bad. I can manage." Didn't ask if you could manage, asked if you needed a ride. He grabbed his keys before she could argue. "Come on, my truck's out back." They drove through town in comfortable silence. Frank didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just got her home safely and helped carry the groceries inside. "You got chains on your tires?" he asked, looking at her car parked beside the cottage. "No? I'll bring some by tomorrow. Can't have you getting stuck if you need to get somewhere fast." He nodded toward her belly. Baby could come early. Best to be prepared. After he left, Caroline stood in the kitchen putting away groceries and thought about how strange it was that people here kept helping her without wanting anything in return. In Ethan's world, everything was transactional. Every favor came with strings attached. But here, kindness seemed to just exist for its own sake. She was making dinner when her phone rang. Ethan. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Caroline?" He sounded relieved she'd answered. "How are you?" "Fine." "The baby?" "Also fine." Awkward silence. They'd barely spoken in weeks, and now neither seemed to know how to bridge the gap. "I need to tell you something," Caroline said finally. "About your mother." "What about her?" "Your father. How he died." Another pause. Then carefully. "What about it?" "My lawyer's been digging into medical records. Found some irregularities in the toxicology report. Elevated levels of a heart medication your father wasn't prescribed." She heard Ethan's breathing change. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's a possibility your father didn't die of natural causes, that someone gave him that medication deliberately." "You think my mother killed him?" It wasn't a question. "I think it's possible. I think she had motive. He wanted to step back from the business, maybe dismantle parts of it, and I think she had opportunity. She was there when he died." More silence. Caroline waited, letting him process. I need to see those records, he said finally. Patricia has them. I can have her send them to you. Do it, tonight. His voice had gone cold in that way it did when he was making decisions that would change everything. If what you're saying is true, if my mother actually did this, then what? Then she needs to answer for it. Caroline hadn't expected that. She'd half thought he'd defend Vivian, make excuses, choose family loyalty over truth. You'd testify against her? She asked. If the evidence supports it? Yes. I loved my father, Caroline. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying to be better, trying to leave the criminal side of things behind. And if my mother killed him to prevent that, he stopped, started again. I'll do whatever needs to be done. After they hung up, Caroline called Patricia and had her send the records to Ethan. Then she sat in the growing darkness and wondered what she'd just set in motion. The answer came 3 days later. She was at Dr. Mitchell's office for a checkup when her phone started buzzing non-stop. Text after text, all from news alerts. She ignored them until the appointment was done, then checked while walking to her car. The headlines made her stop in her tracks. Sterling family matriarch under investigation for husband's death. Vivian Sterling questioned in connection with possible murder. FBI opens inquiry into Richard Sterling's death. Caroline's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the articles. Ethan had gone to the FBI with the medical records. Had given them everything. Testimony about his mother's behavior before and after his father's death, evidence of financial irregularities, witness statements from staff members who'd been paid to stay quiet. He'd burned his mother's empire to the ground in less than 72 hours. Her phone rang. Rachel. Are you seeing this? Her sister said, voice pitched high with excitement. It's everywhere. Every news station, every website. They're saying Vivian Sterling might go to prison. I know. You did this, you and Patricia. Ethan did this. We just gave him the information. Still, this is huge. If Vivian goes down, the whole custody fight goes away. She can't threaten you from prison. Caroline leaned against her car, suddenly exhausted. It's not over yet. They have to prove it first. And Vivian has lawyers, money, connections. She's not going down without a fight. But at least she's fighting the FBI now instead of you. That was true enough. Caroline drove back to the cottage in a day. The snow had mostly melted, leaving everything gray and muddy. She let herself inside and found a message on the answering machine. Ethan again. I know you've seen the news by now. I wanted you to hear this from me directly. I gave them everything. Every file, every record, every piece of evidence I could find. My mother's lawyers are already trying to bury it, but I won't let that happen. Whatever it takes, I'm seeing this through. A pause. I should have done this years ago. Should have stood up to her the first time she crossed a line. I didn't because I was weak, because I thought family loyalty meant protecting her no matter what. But I was wrong, and I'm sorry it took me this long to figure that out. The message ended. Caroline played it again. Listened to the exhaustion in his voice, the resignation. He sounded like a man who'd finally stopped running from something he should have faced a long time ago. She picked up the phone and called him back. Thank you, she said when he answered. For what? For doing the right thing. Finally. Yeah, well, turns out the right thing is expensive. My mother's already cut me off from the family accounts. Her lawyers are fighting to freeze my assets, claim I'm acting irrationally. Half the board wants me out of the company. I'm sorry. Don't be. I should have walked away from all of it years ago. He laughed, but it sounded bitter. You know what's funny? I spent my whole life building power, accumulating wealth, making sure everyone feared the Sterling name, and now I'm about to lose it all. And the only thing I really care about is whether my daughter will know I tried. She'll know. Will you tell her when she's old enough to understand? Will you tell her I stood up to my mother even though it cost me everything? Caroline closed her eyes. If you keep your promises, if you prove you can be the father she needs. That's all I want. A chance to prove it. They talked for another hour. Not about the investigation or the legal battles or any of the chaos swirling around them. Just about small things. How the pregnancy was going, what names Caroline had been considering, whether the baby would have his eyes or hers. Normal things that felt impossibly precious given everything else. When they finally hung up, Caroline felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, but close enough. The FBI investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, they'd exhumed Richard Sterling's body and confirmed the presence of lethal levels of digoxin in his system. Within 3 weeks, they'd tracked down the doctor who'd signed off on the death certificate and gotten him to admit he'd been paid to overlook inconsistencies. Within a month, Vivian Sterling was arrested at her estate in Westchester and charged with first-degree murder. Caroline watched the footage on the news. Vivian being led out in handcuffs, perfectly composed even then, her expression giving nothing away. The reporters shouting questions, the flash of cameras, the slow-motion collapse of an empire that had seemed untouchable. Rachel called immediately. "She's done. She's actually done. The trial hasn't happened yet, but it will. And with Ethan testifying against her with all that evidence, there's no way she walks away from this." Caroline wanted to believe that, but she'd learned not to underestimate Vivian Sterling. Sure enough, 2 days later, Vivian made bail. $5 million, posted by lawyers who appeared out of nowhere with offshore accounts and shell corporations. She was out within hours, back at her estate, already planning her defense. Patricia called with the news. "She's out, and she's dangerous. More dangerous now than ever because she has nothing left to lose." "What do I do?" "Stay where you are. Don't come back to New York. I know you're due soon, but find a hospital up there, have the baby in Maine. Do not come anywhere near Vivian Sterling." "What about Ethan?" "What about him?" "If I have the baby here, he won't be able to be there. The press is following him everywhere now. If he suddenly drives to Maine, they'll figure out where I am." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "That's his problem, not yours. Your job is to stay safe." But after they hung up, Caroline couldn't stop thinking about it. About Ethan missing his daughter's birth because she was hiding. About her baby girl coming into the world with her father hundreds of miles away. Not because he didn't want to be there, but because Caroline couldn't risk being found. She was still thinking about it a week later when her water broke. It was 3 a.m. Caroline woke to cramping and wetness and the sudden realization that this was happening now, ready or not. She managed to get to her phone and call Dr. Mitchell, who answered on the second ring, sounding completely awake. "How far apart are the contractions?" the doctor asked. "I don't—" Caroline gasped as another wave hit. "Maybe 10 minutes? Get to the hospital, now. I'll meet you there." "I can't drive." "Then call someone who can." Caroline hung up and stared at her phone. She could call Tom next door, or Meg down the street. But it was the middle of the night, and she was about to ask a near stranger to drive her an hour to the nearest hospital. Instead, she called the one person she actually wanted there. Ethan answered immediately, voice rough with sleep. "Caroline, what's wrong?" "The baby's coming." She heard him moving, the sound of footsteps, a door closing. "Where are you? I'm getting in the car right now." "You can't. The press will follow you." "I don't care about the press. Where are you?" "Ethan." "Caroline." His voice was steady, certain. "Tell me where you are. I'll lose them. I'll figure it out. Just tell me." So she did. Gave him the name of the town, the address of the hospital in the next county over. And then she called Tom Bradley, who showed up at her door 5 minutes later in pajamas and a winter coat, helped her into his truck without asking a single question. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear, and Tom's steady voice telling her to breathe, just breathe. They'd get there in time. They did. Barely. Dr. Mitchell was waiting at the emergency entrance with a wheelchair and a team of nurses who got Caroline into a delivery room so fast she didn't have time to be scared. "How long until the baby comes?" she managed to ask between contractions. "Hard to say. First babies can take a while. Could be hours." Dr. Mitchell checked her vitals, frowned slightly. "Or could be faster. Let's see how you progress." It was faster, much faster. The contractions came harder and closer together until there was no break between them, just continuous pain that made Caroline want to scream. She did scream, actually, didn't care who heard, just focused on getting through each wave. "I need you to push," Dr. Mitchell said. And Caroline did, pushed until she thought she'd break in half, pushed until the doctor said she could see the head, just a little more, one more push. And then suddenly there was crying. High and thin and perfect. A baby's first protest at being forced into the world. "It's a girl," Dr. Mitchell said, lifting a tiny red-faced creature onto Caroline's chest. Healthy lungs on this one. Caroline looked down at her daughter and felt everything else fall away. The fear, the anger, the months of running and hiding and fighting. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except this impossibly small person with a furious expression and searching eyes. "Hi," Caroline whispered. "I'm your mom." The baby stopped crying, looked up at her with dark blue eyes that would probably turn brown eventually. Ethan's eyes. "You're perfect," Caroline said, even though the baby was covered in blood and vernix and looked nothing like the clean, swaddled infants from magazines. "You're absolutely perfect." They let her hold the baby for a few minutes before taking her to clean up and do all the necessary checks. Caroline lay there, exhausted and shaking, and felt tears sliding down her face without quite knowing why. Joy, maybe. Relief. Overwhelming love for a person she'd just met. A nurse came back with the baby wrapped in a pink blanket. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 20 inches long. All her tests look great. "Have you chosen a name?" "Anya," Caroline said. She'd been keeping a list for months, but the moment she'd seen her daughter's face, she'd known. "Anya Marie Sterling." "That's beautiful. Do you want me to call anyone, the father?" "He's on his way, I think." She'd texted him when they first got to the hospital, but that was hours ago. No idea if he'd gotten the message, if he'd managed to lose the press, if he was even coming. But 2 hours later, there was a knock on her hospital room door. Ethan stood there looking like he'd driven through hell to get here. His hair was a mess, his clothes rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. But when he saw Caroline holding the baby, his whole face changed. "Is that her?" he said quietly. "Yeah, this is Anya." He came closer, moving carefully like he was afraid he'd break something. "Can I?" Caroline shifted slightly, making room. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at his daughter with an expression of complete wonder. "She's so small," he said. 7 pounds isn't that small. "She's the smallest thing I've ever held." He reached out tentatively, touching one tiny hand. Anya's fingers wrapped around his automatically. "Hi, Anya. I'm your dad." The baby made a small noise. Not quite a cry, not quite a coo, just a sound acknowledging his presence. "I drove 130 miles an hour to get here," Ethan said, not looking away from Anya. "Lost the press somewhere around Hartford. Pretty sure I broke about 50 traffic laws." "You could have gotten arrested. Worth it." He finally looked up at Caroline. "Thank you for letting me be here. I know I didn't deserve it." "She deserves to know her father. That doesn't mean we're okay. Doesn't mean everything's forgiven." "I know." They sat there in silence for a while, both looking at Anya, who'd fallen asleep with her tiny fist still wrapped around Ethan's finger. "My mother's lawyers filed a motion for emergency custody," Ethan said finally. "Claimed you're unstable, that you fled the state to keep me from my child. They want the judge to give Anya to my mother pending trial." Caroline's arms tightened around the baby. "That's not happening." "I know. I already submitted a counter motion, testified that you left because my mother threatened you, that she manipulated the situation to isolate you. My lawyer says it won't go anywhere, especially given that she's currently facing murder charges." "Your lawyer or her lawyer?" "Mine. I fired all the family lawyers, got my own representation." He smiled tiredly. "Turns out when you accuse your mother of murder, people stop taking her side quite so automatically." "Is she going to prison?" "If there's any justice in the world, yes. The evidence is overwhelming, but she's Vivian Sterling. She spent 50 years building connections, buying loyalty, making sure she has leverage over anyone who matters. So who knows?" Caroline looked down at Anya, at her daughter's peaceful, sleeping face. "I won't let her anywhere near my baby. I don't care what any judge says. Our baby. And neither will I." Ethan stood up carefully, easing his finger free from Anya's grip. "I should go. Let you rest." "Where will you go?" "Hotel somewhere. Or maybe I'll just sleep in my car. Wouldn't be the worst place I've slept lately. There's a motel in town. Nothing fancy, but it's clean." He nodded, started toward the door, then turned back. "Caroline?" "Yeah?" "I meant what I said before, about proving I can be the father she needs. I know it won't happen overnight. I know I have to earn your trust back. But I will. However long it takes." After he left, Caroline held Anya closer and breathed in that newborn smell everyone talked about. milk and powder and something indefinable that made her chest ache with love so intense it was almost painful. "Your dad's complicated," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "But he showed up, that's something." The next few days passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and visitors. Tom came by with flowers. Meg brought a painting she'd done of the lighthouse, said it was for Anya's room, wherever that ended up being. Dr. Mitchell checked on them both daily, gruff as ever, but with a softness in her eyes when she looked at the baby. And Ethan came every day, sat in the chair by the window, and held Anya while Caroline rested. Learned how to change diapers and swaddle blankets, and make the baby stop crying just by holding her against his chest. On the third day, while Anya was sleeping and Caroline was finally getting real rest, Patricia called with news. Vivian's trial date is set, 3 months from now, and her lawyers just made an interesting move. What kind of move? They're offering a deal. Voluntary manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. 15 years with possibility of parole. And in exchange, she drops all custody claims on Anya, permanently. Caroline sat up too fast, making her incision ache. She'd give up custody? She knows she's going to lose either way. At trial, she's looking at life without parole. This way, she gets out eventually, maintains some dignity, and doesn't have to publicly admit what she did. It's a good deal. For her, anyway. What does Ethan think? Haven't asked him yet. Wanted to run it by you first. Caroline looked over at Anya sleeping in the hospital bassinet. Her daughter, safe, healthy, perfect, and potentially free from Vivian Sterling's shadow forever. "Tell them we'll take it," she said, "but only if she signs away all parental rights. Not just custody. Everything. I don't want her ever having a claim on my daughter." "I'll make it happen." 2 weeks later, Vivian Sterling signed the papers, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter in her husband's death, got sentenced to 15 years in a federal prison, and officially, legally, permanently gave up any rights to her grandchild. The day the deal went through, Ethan showed up at the cottage where Caroline had returned with Anya. He looked different somehow, lighter, like a weight he'd been carrying for 36 years had finally been lifted. "It's done," he said. "She's gone. For 15 years. Forever, as far as we're concerned. By the time she gets out, Anya will be a teenager, old enough to make her own decisions about who she wants in her life." Caroline adjusted the baby in her arms. "So what happens now?" "That's up to you." Ethan sat down on the porch steps. "I meant what I said, about giving you space, about proving I can be different. But I need to know what you want. Do you want me to stay away, visit sometimes, try to work this out? I'll do whatever you need." Caroline looked at him, really looked at him, this man she'd married in what felt like another lifetime, who'd failed her in so many ways, who'd finally chosen the right side when it mattered most. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I don't know if we can fix what broke between us. Don't know if I can trust you again." "That's fair. But I know Anya deserves a father who shows up, who tries, who doesn't hide behind power and money when things get hard." She met his eyes. "Can you be that person?" "I'm learning how to be." "Then start there. Be her father, be present, be honest, and maybe, eventually, we figure out the rest." Ethan nodded slowly. "I can do that." Anya chose that moment to wake up, making that small mewling sound that meant she was hungry. Caroline stood to take her inside, and Ethan stood too. "Can I help?" he asked. "You can change her diaper while I get ready to feed her." "I can do that." They went inside together, Ethan handling Anya with the careful confidence of someone who'd been practicing, and Caroline watched them both and thought maybe, just maybe, this could work. Not the fairy tale she'd once imagined, not the perfect marriage or the powerful empire or any of the things she'd thought she wanted. Just a chance to build something real, something earned instead of given, something that belonged to them instead of to the Sterling legacy. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The first 3 months were harder than Caroline had expected. Not the baby part. Anya was surprisingly easy, as newborns went. She slept in decent stretches, nursed without much fuss, and seemed content to just exist in whatever space Caroline created for her. No, the hard part was figuring out how to let Ethan be a father without letting him back into her life completely. He came up to Maine every weekend, Friday night through Sunday afternoon, stayed at the motel in town and spent his days at the cottage, learning how to be present without trying to control everything. Learning that being a parent meant doing the boring, unglamorous work, washing bottles, folding tiny clothes, walking Anya around the living room at 2 in the morning when she wouldn't stop crying. Caroline watched him struggle with it, watched him fight his instinct to solve problems by throwing money at them or delegating to staff. There was no staff here, no nannies or housekeepers or assistants, just him and a screaming baby who didn't care that her father used to run a criminal empire.
I don't know what she wants, Ethan said one Saturday night, pacing the cottage with Anya against his shoulder.
The baby had been crying for an hour straight, and nothing worked. I changed her, fed her, checked her temperature. What else is there? Sometimes babies just cry, Caroline said from the couch, where she was trying to stay awake long enough to make sure he didn't accidentally drop their daughter. Sometimes there's no reason. There has to be a reason. Everything has a reason. Not everything. Sometimes things just are what they are. He looked at her over Anya's head, frustrated and exhausted. That's not helpful. I know, but it's true. Caroline stood and took the baby from him. Go take a break. Walk around outside or something. Clear your head. I don't need a break. You've been holding her for an hour. Your arms are shaking. Go. He went, reluctantly, and Caroline sat down with Anya and just let her cry. Didn't try to fix it or solve it or make it stop. Just held her daughter and waited it out. Eventually, Anya exhausted herself and fell asleep mid-wail, going from screaming to silent in the space of a breath. When Ethan came back 20 minutes later, the baby was asleep in Caroline's arms and the cottage was quiet. How did you do that? He asked. I didn't do anything. She just stopped. But you must have done something. I held her. That's it. Sometimes that's all you can do. He sat down beside her and looked at Anya's sleeping face. I'm terrible at this. You're learning. I should be better at it by now. It's been 3 months, Ethan. Nobody's good at parenting in 3 months. Caroline shifted the baby slightly. You know what the difference is between you and me? I accepted from the beginning that I wouldn't have all the answers. You're still trying to figure out how to be perfect at it. What's wrong with wanting to be a good father? Nothing, but good doesn't mean perfect. Good means showing up even when you don't know what you're doing. Good means trying and failing and trying again. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, my father never did this. Never held me when I cried. Never changed a diaper or gave a bottle. He had people for that. And when I was old enough to remember things, all he cared about was training me to take over the business, teaching me how to be hard, how to make people fear me, how to never show weakness. Is that the kind of father you want to be? No, but I don't know how to be anything else. Caroline looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd had everything and lost most of it, who'd betrayed his mother to protect his daughter, who drove 5 hours every weekend just to learn how to be present. You're already different, she said. You're here. That's more than your father ever gave you. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of believing he could actually do this. The weeks turned into months. Summer came to Lighthouse Point, bringing tourists and warmer weather and long days where the sun didn't set until after 9. Anya grew, hit milestones, went from being a sleepy newborn to an alert baby who smiled when she saw familiar faces and grabbed at everything within reach. Ethan kept coming every weekend, started coming up on Thursday nights too, leaving his business meetings early so he could have an extra day with Anya. Caroline watched him fall completely in love with his daughter, watched him become the kind of father who got down on the floor to play, who made ridiculous faces to get her to laugh, who could put her to sleep just by humming some old song his own father probably never sang to him. But they still weren't together, still slept in separate rooms when he stayed at the cottage, him on the couch, her in the bedroom with Anya's crib beside the bed. Still moved around each other carefully, politely, like strangers sharing space rather than two people who'd once promised forever. Rachel came to visit when Anya was 4 months old, took one look at the situation and pulled Caroline aside while Ethan was out getting groceries. So are you two going to deal with this or just keep dancing around each other forever? Rachel asked. Deal with what? With the fact that you clearly still have feelings for him and he's completely in love with you. He's in love with Anya. That's different. He drove 5 hours every weekend for 4 months. He restructured his entire business so he could work remotely. He learned how to change diapers and make bottles and do all the things he used to think were beneath him. Rachel crossed her arms. That's not just about the baby, Caroline. It doesn't matter. Too much has happened. His mother, Isabella, all of it.
His mother's in prison. Isabella was never actually pregnant, and he burned his entire empire to the ground to protect you and Anya. At what point do you stop punishing him for the past and start looking at who he is now? Caroline didn't have an answer for that. When Ethan got back with groceries, Rachel cornered him next. "What are your intentions with my sister?" she asked, while Caroline was upstairs putting Anya down for a nap.
Ethan looked up from unpacking milk and eggs. "My intentions? Yeah, are you trying to get back together? Just co-parenting? What's the plan here?" "There is no plan. I'm just trying to be the father Anya deserves." "And Caroline? What about what she deserves?" "What she deserves is someone who won't fail her. Someone who won't let their mother manipulate them or put business before family or any of the other things I did wrong." He set down a carton of orange juice carefully. "I love her. I never stopped loving her, but I don't know if I can be what she needs." "Have you asked her what she needs?" "I'm afraid of the answer." Rachel studied him for a moment. "You know what I think? I think you're both so busy protecting yourselves from getting hurt again that you're missing what's right in front of you. But that's just my opinion. You two have to figure it out yourselves." After Rachel left, Caroline and Ethan didn't talk about it. Just went back to their careful routine of shared parenting and separate lives. But something had shifted. Caroline found herself noticing things she'd been trying to ignore. The way Ethan looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way he always made sure there was coffee ready in the morning before she woke up. The way he'd started keeping a change of clothes at the cottage, a toothbrush in the bathroom, little pieces of himself taking up space in her life. Anya turned 6 months old on a Tuesday. Ethan took the whole week off and came up early, surprising Caroline by showing up Monday morning with bags of groceries and a birthday cake, even though Anya was too young to eat it. "She won't remember this," Caroline said, watching him set up decorations in the living room. "I'll remember it. That's what matters." He hung a banner that said "Happy Half Birthday" in cheerful letters. "Every moment counts, right? That's what you told me." They celebrated with just the three of them. Sang to Anya, who looked confused by the attention but smiled anyway. Took 1,000 pictures, let the baby smash her hands into a small piece of cake, which she immediately tried to eat and then cried about because it turned out she didn't actually like the taste. That night, after Anya was asleep and they'd cleaned up the mess, Caroline found Ethan sitting on the porch looking out at the ocean. She grabbed 2 beers from the fridge and joined him. "You did good today," she said, handing him one. "Yeah? Yeah, she'll look at these pictures someday and know her dad cared enough to make a big deal out of 6 months. They sat in silence for a while, drinking beer and listening to the waves. "I've been thinking about something," Ethan said finally, "about what happens next. With us." Caroline's heart started beating faster. "Okay, I want to be here, not just weekends, not just visiting. I want to actually be here, with you and Anya, as a family." "Ethan, let me finish." He set down his beer and turned to face her. "I know I screwed up. I know I let my mother control my life. Let the business matter more than you, made 1,000 mistakes. And I know that just because I've changed doesn't mean you owe me forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway, asking if maybe we could try again. Really try. Not go back to what we were, but build something new." Caroline looked at him, at this man who'd traveled so far from who he used to be, who'd learned how to be vulnerable, how to admit he didn't have all the answers, how to put someone else's needs before his own. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of believing you've changed and then finding out you haven't. Of letting you back in and having my heart broken all over again. Of Anya getting attached and then losing you if this doesn't work out. Those are all fair fears. So what do we do about them? We take it slow. We don't make promises we can't keep. We just try, one day at a time, and see what happens." He reached over and took her hand. "I can't guarantee I won't mess up again. I'm still learning how to be a decent human being, but I can guarantee I'll show up, that I'll try, that I'll choose you and Anya over everything else, every single time." Caroline looked down at their joined hands. His grip was warm, solid, real. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, we try, but I mean it about taking it slow. You don't just move in. You don't start making decisions about Anya's life without consulting me. You don't—" He kissed her, cut off her words with his mouth on hers, and for a second Caroline forgot all her rules and conditions and just kissed him back. It felt familiar and new at the same time, like coming home to a place that had been renovated while you were gone. Recognizable, but different. When they broke apart, Ethan was smiling. Sorry, I've been wanting to do that for months. We're supposed to be taking it slow. That was slow. You should see what fast looks like. She laughed despite herself. You're impossible. I know, but you love me anyway. Did she? Caroline had spent so long being angry, being hurt, being determined not to let him back in, that she hadn't really examined what she actually felt. But sitting there with his hand in hers, looking at the life they'd started building together piece by careful piece, she thought maybe Rachel had been right. Maybe she'd never stopped loving him. Maybe she'd just stopped trusting that love was enough. I might, she said, but you have to earn it back every day. Understand? I understand, and I will. They sat there until the beer was gone and the stars came out, talking about logistics. Ethan would rent a place in town instead of staying at the motel, would keep his apartment in New York for business but make Maine his primary residence, would take on partners to handle the day-to-day operations of his company, the legitimate parts anyway, since he'd been systematically divesting from anything questionable so he could actually be present instead of constantly managing crises. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale Caroline had once imagined when she'd married a powerful man who seemed capable of anything. But it was real. It was honest. And maybe that was better. The next few months proved harder than either of them expected. Turned out that trying to rebuild a marriage while raising a baby and dealing with the aftermath of Vivian's imprisonment and the complete restructuring of Ethan's life wasn't exactly simple. They fought. A lot. About small things and big things and everything in between. Caroline got angry when Ethan slipped back into old patterns, making decisions without consulting her or assuming money could solve problems. Ethan got frustrated when Caroline wouldn't trust him, when she kept him at arm's length even when he was doing everything right. Anya, oblivious to the adult drama, just kept growing and changing and demanding attention at the worst possible moments. The breaking point came when Anya was 9 months old. Ethan's lawyers called to say Vivian wanted a phone call with her granddaughter. Just once. 5 minutes. She'd signed away her rights, but she wanted to hear Anya's voice, to know she existed. Absolutely not, Caroline said when Ethan brought it up. I told them the same thing, but they're saying it's a humanitarian issue, that she's dying in prison. She's not dying, she's manipulating. I know. But what if she actually is sick? What if this is her last chance and we say no, and then Anya grows up wondering why we kept her from her grandmother? Her grandmother murdered her grandfather. That's why. They argued about it for hours. Ethan saying maybe one phone call wouldn't hurt. Caroline saying it was the thin edge of the wedge, that Vivian would find a way to use any contact to worm her way back into their lives. It escalated until they were both yelling, until Anya started crying from the noise, until Caroline said, maybe this was a mistake. Them trying again. Maybe they were too broken to fix. Ethan left. Went back to his rented house and didn't come back for 3 days. Caroline spent those days taking care of Anya and questioning everything. Maybe she was being too hard on him. Maybe she was holding grudges for things that were in the past. Or maybe she was right to be cautious, right to protect her daughter from anyone associated with Vivian Sterling. She was feeding Anya lunch when there was a knock on the door. Tom from next door holding an envelope. This came to my place by mistake, he said. Figured you'd want it. It was from the prison. A letter from Vivian, addressed to Caroline. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. She waited until Anya was down for her nap, then opened it. The letter was short. No apologies, no justifications, just a few lines in Vivian's precise handwriting. You won. You have my son, my grandchild, the life I tried to prevent you from having. I hope it's worth what it cost you both. But here's what I learned too late. Power doesn't keep you warm at night. Money doesn't love you back. And controlling everything means you end up alone. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't let fear of losing control destroy what actually matters. I won't contact you again. This is goodbye. Caroline read it 3 times. Then she called Ethan. I'm sorry, she said when he answered. About the fight. About pushing you away. About all of it. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have brought up my mother. Shouldn't have asked you to consider letting her have any access to Anya. She sent me a letter. Want to know what it said? She read it to him over the phone.
When she finished, Ethan was quiet for a long moment.
"That's the closest thing to wisdom I've ever heard from her," he said finally.
"I think she's right. About the fear thing, about letting it destroy what matters." Caroline took a breath. "I've been so scared of you turning back into who you were, of Anya getting hurt, of trusting you and being wrong, that I haven't let myself see who you actually are now. And that's not fair to either of us." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying come back, come home. And let's stop pretending we're not building a life together. Let's actually do it." He was at the cottage within an hour. Came through the door and pulled Caroline into a kiss that said everything words couldn't. When they broke apart, Anya was awake and crying from her crib upstairs. "I'll get her," Ethan said. "We'll both get her." They went upstairs together and picked up their daughter, who immediately stopped crying and smiled at seeing both her parents. It was such a small moment. Nothing dramatic or life-changing, just two people and a baby, standing in a nursery in a cottage by the ocean. But it felt like everything. The year Anya turned 1, Ethan asked Caroline to marry him. Not with a grand gesture or an expensive ring or any of the trappings of wealth he used to think mattered, just a quiet question on the porch after they'd put Anya to bed. "I know we're already married legally," he said, "but I want to do it again, the right way, with vows that mean something because we both know what we're promising, with Anya there as a witness. What do you think?" Caroline thought about it, about the first wedding, which had been all flash and performance and trying to look like the perfect couple, about how far they'd come from those people. "I think yes," she said. "But we do it here, small, just us and the people who actually matter." They got married on the beach in September, when Anya was 13 months old. Rachel stood up as Caroline's maid of honor. Tom and Meg came as witnesses. Dr. Mitchell brought flowers from her garden. The ceremony lasted maybe 10 minutes, just long enough to say the vows they'd written themselves. Caroline promised to trust him, but not blindly, to give him space to fail and learn and try again, to build a life based on honesty instead of image. Ethan promised to choose her over power every single time, to never let fear of losing control make him try to dominate her, to be a partner instead of a boss. They kissed while Anya toddled around their feet, chasing a balloon someone had brought. And Caroline thought about Vivian's letter, about not letting fear destroy what mattered. She'd spent so much of her life being afraid, of not being enough, of losing everything, of making the wrong choice. But standing there with Ethan and Anya and the ocean behind them, she wasn't afraid anymore. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with the balance between his work and their family, between her need for independence and their commitment to each other. Anya grew into a toddler who tested boundaries and said no to everything and had her father wrapped completely around her tiny finger. But they showed up for each other. Every argument, every hard day, every moment when it would have been easier to give up, they stayed. They tried. They chose to keep building something real instead of perfect. 2 years after Vivian went to prison, she died there. Heart failure, the report said. Ethan didn't go to the funeral, didn't send flowers or write a eulogy or acknowledge her passing in any public way. He just sat on the cottage porch for a while, holding Anya in his lap, and then came inside and made dinner like it was any other night. "You okay?" Caroline asked. "Yeah, I think I am." He looked at her. "I mourned the mother I needed a long time ago, the one I actually had. I let her go the day I chose you and Anya over her. This is just making it official." When Anya was 3, they bought a house in Lighthouse Point. Not the cottage, which they'd been renting, but an actual house with enough space for Anya to have her own room, and for Ethan to have an office, and for Caroline to finally paint the walls whatever colors she wanted instead of living with someone else's choices. Ethan sold his New York apartment, shut down the last of his questionable business ventures, became the kind of businessman who made money through investments and consulting instead of through fear and leverage. It wasn't as exciting as running an empire, he admitted, but it let him sleep at night. Let him be present for Anya's preschool plays, and Caroline's decision to go back to teaching part-time, and all the small moments that actually mattered. On Anya's 4th birthday, surrounded by kids from her preschool class and neighbors from town and the small community they'd built, Caroline watched Ethan help their daughter blow out her candles and thought about how different this life was from what she'd imagined. She'd thought marrying Ethan Sterling would mean wealth and power and a place in a world where people feared his name. Instead, it meant a house in Maine and a husband who coached their daughter's soccer team, and Friday night dinners with friends who'd never heard of the Sterling Empire and didn't care. It meant ordinary, normal, real, and she wouldn't trade it for anything.
That night, after the party was over and Anya was asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan found Caroline in the kitchen finishing the dishes. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For walking out that night. For refusing to settle. For making me become someone worth coming back to." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I spent my whole life building power, and it never made me happy. But this? You and Anya and this life we've made? This is everything." Caroline leaned back against him. "You know what I learned?"
What?
"That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone willing to do the work, to change, to grow, to choose you even when it's hard." She turned in his arms. "You did that. You did the work. That's why this works." "We both did." "Yeah, we did." They stood there in their kitchen, in their house, in a town that had become home, and Caroline thought about the woman she'd been that night in the restaurant, the one who'd walked out instead of staying, who'd chosen herself instead of settling for less than she deserved. That decision had cost her everything she thought she wanted, but it had given her everything she actually needed. Because here's the truth about power and love and building a life that matters. You can't do it by making yourself smaller. Can't do it by accepting manipulation or control or someone else's version of what your life should be. You do it by walking away from anything that asks you to surrender yourself. And then, maybe, if you're lucky, you find your way back to something real. Ethan had been powerful once, feared and wealthy and in control of an empire. But he'd given it all up to become something better. A decent man, a present father, a husband who showed up. And Caroline had been the quiet wife, the kindergarten teacher who married above her station, the woman who thought she needed to earn her place. But she'd walked away from that and become someone who knew her worth, who wouldn't settle, who built a life on her own terms. Together, they weren't perfect. They were just two people who'd found each other, lost each other, and fought their way back to something worth keeping. Two people who'd learned that the only power that actually matters is the power to choose honesty over image, presence over control, love over fear. And their daughter Anya would grow up seeing that, would learn from their example that strength isn't about dominating others or having all the answers. It's about showing up, doing the work, and choosing the people you love even when it costs you everything else. That's the story Caroline would tell her someday. Not about the mafia boss and the kindergarten teacher, not about the empire that fell or the empire that rose, just about two people who made mistakes and learned from them, who failed and tried again, who proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything you know, and the hardest thing is learning how to come back. Years later, when Anya was old enough to understand, she'd ask her mother about the life they'd left behind, about the wealth and the power and the world where her father's name used to mean something. And Caroline would tell her the truth, that they'd traded all of it for something better. For mornings at the beach and dinner table conversations, and the knowledge that they'd built something real instead of something impressive, that her father had chosen them over everything else, and that choice had made all the difference. Because, in the end, that's what matters. Not the power you hold or the fear you inspire or the wealth you accumulate. Just the people you choose and the life you build with them. Just the courage to walk away from anything that asks you to be less than you are, and the strength to believe you deserve better. Caroline Sterling had learned that the hard way, but she'd learned it, and she'd built a life that proved it day by day, choice by choice, moment by ordinary moment. That was her kingdom, not an empire built on fear, but a home built on love. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.